I'll say like if anybody's like sort of starting to host events and is looking for like speakers and like how to like sort of start forming those relationships, like I would advise to at first like start with like people that you know, right? Like or that you have some sort of connection. Like for me, it was really easy. Like one of our demo nights to like ask maybe Kian from Tome who gave a demo because I had already sort of knew him from another job. Same from Superhuman. I had worked at Superhuman, so it was easy for me to just like email them. And then you've already had demos with like these great brands. You've already had, 2 or 3 events that people loved. And so that's a lot easier to then go to somebody completely cold. But then
By the way, there's typing noises coming out.
Oh yeah, who's typing?
Who's typing?
Is it Ian?
Oh.
Ian, are you typing?
Ian,
Okay.
Could it be earrings hitting your ear?
Could it be earring?
Yes!
Oh
my God. Hey everybody, welcome to the 3rd episode of Building Jam podcast. And today we're gonna talk about a lot of stuff, but maybe we'll start with talking about events and why we do them, how we do it, what does it look like, why. Yeah, like Danny, do you want to kick it off by saying how it all started?
Well, to be clear, like there's one mastermind behind all of this, and she's sitting on the call, and it's Ivana. But we have an event coming up tomorrow, and as we were planning it, we thought like, actually, this might be the topic of the week. So maybe Ivana, you can give some context as like, what is this?
We do 2 to 3 events a month. And this whole thing sort of started like before I got to Jam. I know that Danny and Erdifa had been hosting a few events already. And then we sort of like, and it had like great results, right? Like people were excited to come and have some fun and meet other builders in sort of major cities. And then that's sort of how it started. Like we did it, I think you guys did before me, like New York. And did you guys have one in London or LA?
Did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then when I first started at Jam as like the first marketer, it was like, okay, so what does events look like now with like a person that can like, do more of it and kind of like take it and sort of run with it. And so what it's become now is like 2 to 3 events a month. And it's pretty, we've sort of like finally gotten to this formula, which like works, right? Which is we do tech talks, which are like engineering focused talks. They're lightning talks. We do 4 to 5 of them. People apply, we select them. Sometimes we do community choice, which is really fun. Like people can then select from like the list of applicants what they want to hear. And then we do AI demo nights, which is again,
Ivana, before like, you said something about like a formula, right? But can you take us back a little bit? Like the first day when Danny told you about, hey, like you have to do events, go figure it out. What was that like? Like, what did you actually think, feel? Yeah. What did that feel like in that moment?
It was her interview question.
Oh, right. So before that, like I hadn't really done physical events. I was still sort of like in the webinar land. And so I sort of knew that playbook a little bit, but to be honest, like I think of some people, like there's a lot of people that do find value in webinars. Like I'm not gonna say like nah, but most of the value from webinars probably comes from like maybe downloading the recording after, like not really attending, and because and so we wanted to go like a different route, and so I had almost no experience with physical events, in-person events, and then the first thing that happened was Danny was like, okay, so we have Cloudflare, you guys, ex-Cloudflare PMs. I think they're like the first kind of like event partners that we had. And so when an opportunity like Cloudflare, right, comes up for a startup, you were like, absolutely, yes, no matter what. And so it was like, do you guys want to host an event? I think it was in London in like 3 days. And let's get some signups. I was like,
oh yeah.
Okay.
But like, I guess the part that's confusing to me at the start, or not confusing and maybe unexpected, is just like, we're not in London. None of us are in London.
Yeah.
And so when it's like, oh, we're hosting an event in London, I'm like what? Like what? I remember during the interview process too, like I was also confused at the start because I was like how, like we're a remote company. Like how do we do events? Like that doesn't sound like a very fun event if it's just like one of us hosting an event in a city where we don't, it's not like it's in our office, like I guess it sort of broke my mental model of like what event, like the fact, like who can actually throw events, And so I thought that part was cool because it was new for me.
Yeah, there's a bit of history here. So when we started the company, it was during the pandemic. And so we did a lot of like user interviews and they were all on Zoom. And then as the pandemic started to subside, Urtifa and I did one of the first like user meetings in person at a restaurant in Austin with someone who had been using the product for a while. And it was so special. Like, it was so special. I can't even describe to you how special it was.
Yeah, it was really cool. When I first reached out to that person, you can maybe believe it, like, he's awesome, super awesome guy. Reached out to him. I was like, man, is he gonna think we're like creepy, like wanting to like meet in person and stuff? Because like, think about it this way, right? We have been in lockdown. We're building this company completely online. We have talked to people over Zoom, but for like 2 years, there is no like in-person meeting. Like, in YC, they talk about, oh, go talk to your customers, like meet them in person, go to their office, hunker down there and build things. We can't do that. It's the pandemic. So
Wait, also,
people are
who says
still.
like go hunker down in your customer's office
I think
and
Paul
build
Graham
it?
talked about it. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
it's
the
like the
Stripe
strength.
founders did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems to
So
me a little bit weird. Like, I don't know.
that
If
was
I'm
the
like,
pre-2020 way. That was the pre-2020, but maybe it still is the way, and it's coming back. But anyway, so like people are not used to it. So I reached out to him. Glad he agreed. And it was really fun. It was like very unstructured, right, Danny? Very unstructured. We went to a restaurant. We had sushi, and we just like talked for hours. It was super cool. Like, we were just like, oh man, like we can't believe like this happened. Like, meeting customers in person. This is awesome.
Well, that's not a meetup though. Properly, that's not an event. That just sounds like meeting a user in person.
Yeah, and then we were doing more of those, and like we were just learning so much in person that you don't learn on Zoom. Usually on Zoom, it's like transactional. Like, the role of the Zoom is to get you off the Zoom, But when you meet in person, like, suddenly this whole world gets unpacked, and we just were learning so much. And so we're like, well, how do we do this sort of quote at scale? And so we emailed the user base and we said, we're going to host an event in New York. And the first event was engineering horror stories. It was like off the record conversations, engineers sharing when they took down prod. We didn't come up with this idea. Segment did. So we just they used to have an event called SegFault. I used to go in San Francisco. It was super fun to hear about when production would go down. So we did that. And it was just like so awesome to meet our users. And we just thought, let's keep doing this. At the beginning, it was just like meet our users. Now it's also like a way for us to introduce Jam to new people. But in the beginning, that's sort of all it was.
And that's where that question comes from. I'm just thinking, like, when we're at the event and you say like, oh, turn to your neighbor and say a time that you took down prod. Like,
oh yeah,
that's a fun. I didn't know that one.
Every engineer is.
But remember, Danny, that first event, I don't know about you, but it was very anxiety inducing for me. Like, I didn't know if people were going to show up.
Yeah.
And we're like, we're setting up these. So it's us. We're setting up the chairs in this room. Yeah. And we're like, man, like, do we even need these many chairs? Like, will people actually show up? And like, okay, how do we make it look like, people, a lot of people did show up, even if they didn't. Like, all sorts of like thoughts going through our head. And when people actually, we couldn't let everyone sit. There were so many people. We couldn't believe that this happened.
Do you remember? We'll need to bleep this name, but do you remember when arrived early just to have time to chat? And at that moment we knew like this is going to be okay.
Yeah, man, that was so awesome. And we
now
ran out of pizza. We ran out of like sparkling water because we didn't realize like how many people would show up. Like, it was...
Wait, how? We never run out of LaCroix. Never. Always so much left over.
But that's the reason why.
That's the reason.
And how did you get everyone? Like, how'd you get everyone to show up? I'm like, did we email everyone? Did we put it on like Luma or something? Like,
that was all Danny, by the way, not me.
Oh, it was actually so we emailed our user base like the same way that we like announced the product, and that was it. And I think we tweeted about it, but like this is pre fancy Luma everything. One other thing that we should say is like the real history is, while like we had this inkling that it would work, I was really skeptical. And I was really nervous that a lot of work would fall on Urtifa and me of like scrambling last minute to get people to show up. So we work with, like at the time we were working with this marketing contractor, and he's like, hey, I really think that if you do this, it'll work really well. And just trust me, and I've got it. And I told him, you promise I won't have to like last minute scramble and do everything? And he said, I promise. And so we're like, hey, we trust you. Let's do the first event. And then the rest is history. Like, he was right. I was wrong. Like, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty.
Yeah.
Wow, for that to have that confidence in that and saying that to you when you're the marketing contractor, you haven't even built this thing. Like to pretend like you would know the user base better than you would know to who. Like, oh, that's wow.
Yeah, I feel like now, like the biggest anxiety, honestly, and this is like such a humble brag. Like, oh, I'm so anxious because because the anxiety is actually like being overfilled,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like, and it's a real problem because it's
Yeah.
like the attendance rate is all over the place. It ranges, and I'm gonna say this, like if anybody tells you that like an event attendance rate is like 50% for in person, they're probably lying. Like it's not. It's
They've
usually
never
between
hosted at GitHub.
right. Well, except GitHub. GitHub is like 100%. Everybody shows up. Be prepared. But like normally it's like 35, 40%. So like what I was saying is like this attendance thing is honestly really difficult. It's hard to predict. It's anywhere from 35 to 50%. And so it's like you're playing with this of I don't want to have, 50 people show up to a 100-person event. I also don't want to have 20 people outside that I can't let in. So that's like I'm stressed about that every time. Like,
But is there like a magic thing you can do to like avoid that and find the right balance? Like, is there like any science to it?
Can't you just let everyone in? Like, come on, they showed up there, right? Like, how many more could it be, right? Just like,
Yeah. There's like a little bit of science. What I've gotten down to is sort of like going with the number that I can live with on either end. So if it's like, attendance happens to be high and we have like 100 capacity, and I think, you know what, chances are that if like the attendance is the most that it's going to be, and it's going to be like, 115 people, I think that I can like, our co-hosts will understand and like we'll let 15 people in. Like it's a small risk. And also that same number is like if attendance is low, okay, maybe we're aiming for 100, but we'll have 85, and I can also live with that. So that's sort of it's no science. It's kind of like, somewhere in the middle, that it's a small risk on either end.
I mean, the truth is you can really let people in, but the problem is like there's someone at the door who's talking about fire hazard and just like having on everyone's style, basically.
Yeah, like at the GitHub office, they have like real security. Like they can't put just limited people on the first floor. Like that was very uncomfortable, and we had to like decline people at the door.
Yeah, I felt so bad. But yeah, I'm sorry that happened. I wasn't expecting, again, GitHub, like so many people. But luckily, I think since then, we haven't really had any issues. We have had like sort of like more people show up than expected, but we've been able to let them in. So that's been good. I mean, and on the flip side, we've also had like, we've been like so self-assured and like, this is going to be awesome. And then we've had like way lower attendance than we were expecting. Like,
yeah. One of the things that I really like, I love the events that we do. They're super fun. Like we meet such amazing builders, we meet our users, like there's like unlimited good. But the thing that I struggle with is people use Jam in 150 something countries. And like, we're really hosting events in San Francisco mostly. And then like once in a while we'll be like, oh, and also this one in Berlin or also this one in New York, but it's like a big effort for us. And like, yeah, we could do something like online. I've just never been to an online event that I thought felt meaningful, where I actually built like real connections, where it felt like a high quality thing. And I just really struggle with like what that would look like.
Yeah, I think I don't know what that would look like either, because like, I think that the biggest like benefit or draw from people going to our events, like what they get the most out of it is kind of just like each other. It's not really like the talks and the demos are cool, but they're more an excuse to bring people together, I think. Like, and so how do you replicate that like in a Zoom meeting where everybody's just looking at their faces, like how can you talk? I mean, I guess that could happen in a setting of like a family reunion where you all know each other and it's COVID, and so you have this big Zoom chat. But I don't see that as like as a community boosting kind of mechanism. More of just like as an information giving mechanism.
The closest thing to that, like if you want to replicate to like some extent, still not going to be as good as an in-person event, but doing like watch party style, like, where you invite people over to watch Game of Thrones. Of course, like a software event is going to be not as spicy as a Game of Thrones finale. But like if you get a bunch of people to like watch the event together and participate in that way, I think that's more interesting. I remember like when I used to work at Retail Me Not, I used to work in the mobile team. So whenever we had WWDC, the Apple event, we would basically book one of the rooms for the entire day, where if we didn't have any meetings, and as an engineer, I had 0 meetings. So I just like hung out all day in that meeting room, like watching the WWDC event. So that's another way to like, because you have the people around you watching it, so you can like talk to them, and it's much more personal than just, hey, like let's just show our heads everywhere.
By the way, so I do you know how the idea for the first, so our first event was Engineering Horror Stories, which is a format that we saw Segment do and loved. Do you know how the AI demo night came about?
No?
So it was early GPT era. And I went to a North Zone VC like hangout at a bar. It was just like founder hangout. And I'm talking to this guy and he's like, and I'm like, he's like describing what he's building. And I'm like, this sounds amazing. Can you show me? And he takes out his phone and he shows me what he's building. It's Grant Davis. He's building this app called Wand, which is like you doodle a little bit and AI makes it magical. And I was blown away. And I slacked Jason the next morning and I said, I just saw a live demo of what Grant Davis is building. And we should do a demo night and we should have him demo it for like New York City and then like find a few other people to demo. But mostly it's just him. And so we did. We had the first demo night. I had 3 demos. He was one of them. And now and like the rest is infinity. And actually I think like now there's tons of AI demo nights all over the world, but at the time there were none. It was like a new idea. And we or like it wasn't new. Like I'd been to demo nights when I was in college. Like Tech at NYU did Tech at NYU demo days. But this whole idea of just like anyway, so that's go Grant Davis. He started a movement.
That's awesome. I mean, how do we usually find our demos these days?
Ivana.
I'm like, well, no, we have, so there's like two pathways to demoing at a jam event. So one of it is we have application for each of the events that we host. We'll post like demo application in the event, sort of information registration, and so we get applications through there. But we also source a lot of them just ourselves. And how we do that is basically looking at products that we think are cool, that we really like, that are AI, and then stalking people to see who would be a good demoer and sliding into their DMs and being like, hey, have you considered demoing?
It's so cool actually to have like a format where like we can like give like publicity to people who we think are building really, publicity is probably strong, but like give a platform to people who are like we think are building really cool things. Like an example of that is back when I was a VC, so like so long ago, I saw this founder pitch who blew me away. And at the time, it was a really, really early startup, but now it's like a real thing in the world. And it was Tony from Wizard. And it really captivated my brain. It's so amazing what he's building. And I just like was bookmarked in the back. And so when we started doing these AI demo nights, I emailed him and was like, would you want to demo one of these? And now like, 200 people saw him demo in person in San Francisco, but also a lot of people watch that video online. And so it's cool to be able to like spread the things that you think are cool in the world.
Yeah. And I'll say like if anybody's like sort of starting to host events and is looking for like speakers and like how to like sort of start forming those relationships, like I would advise to at first like start with like people that you know, right? Like, or that you have some sort of connection. Like for me, it was really easy. Like one of our demo nights to like ask maybe Kian from Tome who gave a demo, because I had already sort of knew him from another job. Same from Superhuman. I had worked at Superhuman, so it was easy for me to just like email them. So if you start like that with like just like the low hanging fruit of people in your network that you can tap, and then you've already had demos with like these great brands. You've already had 2 or 3 events that people loved, and so that's a lot easier to then go to somebody completely cold with like here is what we've done in the past. Here is who has demoed. Here's what you can expect, rather than just sort of like asking somebody who doesn't know you to like take a chance on this event.
What does it look like when people cancel at the last moment? Like they're gonna demo, but then they just DM you saying, "Hey, yo, I can't make it." Like never happens.
Never happened.
No, it's never happened.
Never happened. But one time we had a guy who was going to demo, and then he's running from it. He was like, it was like an important week of a startup. They're like setting up their first pilot customer, and it's not like going perfectly to plan. He's like, I need more time. I need more time.
Yeah.
He's like, I think I still can make it to demo. And he's like, I'm in the car. Like it says like ETA 27 minutes. Like, and will I make it in time? And then he like just in time made it, demoed, and crushed. It was great.
Well, we almost had one for tomorrow's event, which we actually need, like, because we usually have like 4 to 5. This time we have 3, so we need the 3, right? And one of them almost canceled, and he like DM'd me on Twitter. He was like, "Hey, like, I was like, did you get the calendar invite? Like, I see you haven't accepted." He was like, "Oh yeah, I got it, but it's just, like, I think I might not do it because it's not like ready." And what I did, and if he ever listens to this podcast, like, he'll know. Whatever, I did it. I was like, I already told everybody you're coming. And so he's coming. He's doing
That's amazing.
Great.
One thing that, so there was, okay, so the moment that we started doing events, there was like a broader thing happening at Jam, which was we had hit product market fit, and we knew that because the retention looked really good and it was growing through word of mouth. And the people coming in were then retaining and then growing it. Like the products looked good. And so we're like, well, how do we grow this thing? That's like the next stage of the company. And at the time, the like hot thing to do was community. Like, if you remember back in the pandemic, everyone was talking about community. Community was the hot word. It's because it was like crypto, and people meant by community was like a Discord group or a Slack group.
Yeah.
And we had this sort of like conflict internally, which was like, everyone says this is the thing to do. And also, we're not in any online communities like that we think are actually alive or all that great. It's like sort of where discussion goes to die was like the hard take there. And so we were really struggling with that. And so we decided we would not do a Slack community, and we would try doing in-person community. And at the time felt very like contrarian.
Yeah. I mean, it also depends on like, right, your definition of community. Like, it could be nice if you have like a Slack or a Discord where it lives, but I would agree with you that most of the time it's not. Like, I mean, if you look at my Slack, it's just, I always have a million notifications because I'm part of like a million Slack channels that I never check, and it's kind of just like annoying. Like it does end up sort of becoming that. But like, I don't think that Jam's community is just in person. I think Jam community is like everywhere. Like I don't know how to explain it. Like, I think that like we do community marketing, except we don't have a community forum. But you can still do community marketing by, telling user stories, by talking to them. Like whenever a user tweets about Jam or whatever, like we engage with them and we want to talk more. Our Reddit ad is blowing up, and like we're engaging with every single kind of like comment on Reddit. And whenever we meet the people in person, and then we become like, LinkedIn connections, and then we discuss things or we go on coffee chats, and that's just like one-on-one kind of engagement that I think is really valuable to a community. And so just because you don't have like a Slack or a Discord doesn't mean that you're not doing community marketing online.
Yeah.
Why is it that like, when you see Reddit, right? Like, it's not like online communities don't exist. Like, yes, like, when tech people do it, it's usually Slack or Discord, and it looks like a support channel. Like, so that's not really a community. But if you look at like Reddit, like millions, hundreds of millions of people are creating subreddits. They're getting people to show up. They're talking about things. They're creating super engaging content. Not everyone is a lurker, but like, when you create a community for like a SaaS product, usually it looks like just most people are lurking. No one's really posting other than, hey, this is a product update, or I have a support problem. But like, why is it working for like communities in Reddit or even like Facebook communities, but why not like for like SaaS products?
I guess that it feels like it needs to be so strong what the use is for the community, or it needs to be so easy to participate and so clear why you would. Like, one that comes to mind is like like for creators, a thumbnail sharing forum where you'd share your thumbnails, then people would comment on the thumbnails. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's just very clear. You want to get people that you don't know. That sort of makes sense why you'd be in there. Yeah. And so
you basically, wait. So when you create like videos and you have like those video thumbnails, and these people are just like randomly sharing like thumbnails and asking people to like vote and like talk about like, hey, like, is it good or bad? Is that like a Facebook community or Reddit?
So that's actually a Discord, and it's like, yeah, you would share different variations, or like, what do you like here? Like, and I mean, it's not all super high quality stuff. Most of it is like, I don't know, like in this Discord, most of it's gaming channels and not really like super relevant for the types of videos that we're making. But I guess I think what works there is it's like very clear what you ask for and what you want to get from it. Or another example that comes to mind is like when people want jobs, like people join any community to like get in there and see some job postings, right?
See some jobs. Yeah. I think I have like a little bit of a hot take, and I definitely agree with Ian that like it's sort of part of it, right? If your community has a clear value proposition, which is good for you, like as the community person who is going to join this community, then that makes sense. And so the hot take is, I think that a lot of companies look at community as like a lead pool or like this like source of top of funnel. And that's why then it doesn't really work out. And that's why it's not as alive as it could be, because people don't like being sold to. This is not like a secret. And so if you try to mix like community work with like sales goals, then you won't be able to really actually formulate like a community that is healthy and like thriving. And I think that the best way to do it is like maybe so, and I don't want to say like disassociate your community from your brand, because like one of the biggest benefits of community marketing is having positive associations to your brand, but disassociate it from like selling your product, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
You know Swix?
Yeah. Love Swix.
I think he's one of the most like, I'd say like brilliant, like at community DevRel. I think he like started the AI movement in San Francisco. I might be like overhyping that, but like in my eyes, like the thing that I started seeing of like on the internet where it's like, oh, people are moving to San Francisco for AI, like all the pictures of the hackathons I saw early on, it was all like, it was like him bringing people together. So I don't.
He also really coined the term like AI engineer instead of like ML engineer. I think that was like a big deal.
Yeah, and so he's A, has tons of experience doing like DevRel and community, but B, he just thinks about it in a way that I think is like really, really smart. I just like, and he has this like great blog post where he writes like, you know, how to do like a Slack community for your company in a way that doesn't feel stale. And he says like 3 things. He says the first is it's not a real community if your competitors don't have equal footing and everyone can tell. So he's like, if this is a place where your competitors could not get as much out of it as you are, then everyone feels like it's fake and they can tell and it feels stale. So you have to make it a really equal footing. And the second, he says, maybe I just remember 2 out of 3, but he says basically the thing that Ian wants, Ian said, which is like, people want to advance in their life and their career, and it just has to be a place where you're going to get a job.
Right.
That makes sense. That's why it's hard to do. I mean, I was just saying, like, that's why it's really hard to do. Like, that's why most communities suck.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also I'm confused. Like, okay, so with the competitor thing, like, what do you mean? So like, if we have a Slack channel, then like all of our competitors are welcome and they can say whatever.
Yeah. And they should be like, otherwise is it really a like community, or is it like Jam's marketing newsletter in a Slack format, right?
Yeah.
Yvonne, I think the thing you said is like spot on, which is like the thing that is Jam community right now is sort of like an unbundled Slack channel, where instead of all the conversations happening in one Slack channel, they happen in the comments of Twitter, they happen in our DMs, they happen in the comments on LinkedIn. Like they're like, we have sort of like people we've gotten to know on the internet at this point, and now we're talking to regularly, like every week, every month, who are like Jam users and give us feedback on the product, but we also just talk about like how to build product. And it's all just happening this sort of unbundled way. It's like not in a Slack. It's happening unbundled everywhere else on the internet.
Yeah.
Right, like how communities used to be before the internet, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, it is what we call community just means like making friends like a normal person. Like, but I think like it's also really cool, this unbundled nature of it, because it feels a lot more organic. Like, for example, if I meet a user who shares with me like a product that they're building and I think it's so cool, and then I meet another one and I'm like, oh, you guys should meet because you're working on similar things. And if you can facilitate those types of connections in this way, right, they're not even thinking that I'm doing community work, but like I am. And so that's cool. I think the spicy thing that we haven't talked about is like the actual scalability and ROI of events, rather like is success having a lot of people show up and say that it's awesome, or is success actually having this make an impact in, the company's growth, the revenue, whatever.
Yeah, right. Measuring event ROI. Like when we've co-hosted with other people where like they have to report the ROI of the event. It's like it's the thing, speak the name that I was saying at DevRel dinner, which is my job is to build relationships with people, but then my boss wants me to measure those relationships. And you know what is like suffocating to a relationship is just trying to measure it all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say like if you're trying to measure the ROI of events in this like very kind of methodical scientific way that you're gonna like attach a deal to each person or a percentage of deals closed from event attendance, or I just don't think that that's really the way to think about it. I'm not saying that you can't get sales from events eventually, but that cannot be how you structure the goal of your event, because then
there's a time and a place for it, right? Like I think the people who ask this question about like, hey, like show me the numbers of like how many like deals we closed from like an event. The confusion there is with events like this where you're trying to build a community versus industry events where you go to Vegas, you have a road show, or not a road show, but basically you have a booth and like people walk by and you try to do like demos. And I think people who come from that world, they think community events should be measured the same way. Like, of course, there should be ways to measure it, but it's not the same thing, because in that industry event, the social contract is like people are going to be sold to, so that's why they're there. It's not the same for community events.
Yeah, no, not at all. We're actually like the opposite. Like, and I think that's one of the reasons why, humble brag again, like our event emails get opened a lot, and like our newsletter has like a 68% open rate for the events newsletter. But that's because we're not taking all of those emails and then putting it into a Jam database and then saying like we're gonna do a drip campaign to sell you Jam after you attend, because then that sort of thing the word gets out. People talk to each other. Like we all talk to each other and we know what we say about other brands and stuff, right? And the same thing happens with Jam, right? I'm sure people talk about Jam and say stuff. And so if we were doing those like things, like
they
better talk about Jam. Right. They better. You guys be better talking about that. But so it's like we don't do any of that. We keep it like in the same. It's just the only thing that you're gonna hear from us. If you subscribe to our events calendar, it's about events, and you're only going to get one email a month, and it's only going to be about the events that are coming up, because that's the only thing that you told us that you were interested in hearing.
But then like let me push back on that a little bit. Like we know this, but like people who are hearing this, they're probably going to ask, okay, then why even do this as a company? Like, why are you spending company dollars to do this? Like, what is the point if you're not even trying to close deals?
Right. Well, I think eventually those people migrate to other places in Jam, and maybe they'll sign up for the Jam engineering newsletter, which sort of exists but will really exist soon, or they will check out Jam because it's free and it's self-serve, so they can just get it. And it's not, but I didn't force them to. And maybe they'll go to like 2 or 3 events and meet Danny and meet Ian and hear about Jam that way. I mean, it's definitely worth it. And then they'll talk to each other. And our calendar growth, our calendar subscriber growth is like so good. Like really, it grows about, I don't know, like 1,000 people a month. And in percentage, it's a lot, because it was like we're at 3,500 right now. So it's like it grows very quickly and a lot, and it's awesome. And if we were to then sort of break their trust, right? Those people that have trusted us and that are like relying on us to send them information that they really care about an awesome event and a good time. And that would just hurt our brand, I think, a lot if we were to take that list and be like, now you're in a drip campaign about Jam. Like, I don't know.
100%.
I think trust is right. Like, as a startup, you're asking people to trust you and trust your product, and trust that you're going to keep investing in it, and that trust that you're not going to let them down, and trust these promises that you make, and trust you so much that they are going to feel comfortable introducing their teammates to your product too, and saying, hey, let's do things in this new way. Like, they're putting a lot of trust in you. And these events where you can show up and see like, this is a company that does things in a high quality way. There are humans behind the company. I feel a sense of like, I feel what this company is trying to do. I can trust it. And for you to be treated not as like a marketing lead, but as a real person, like really attending the event, I think it's invaluable.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, like, it's not going to be for everyone, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, the important part here is you leave here with a good experience. So you have a positive emotional attachment to what we're doing. And it's okay if you're not a customer.
And it's totally worked. Like it's worked on us. Like a few weeks before the SVB bank collapse, I went to a panel on New York City Tech that Mercury hosted. And it was a super polished event. There were tons of people I knew there. And I was like, oh my, I had this like great experience. I saw all these people. It was a great panel. It was super high quality. It was in a beautiful space. It was a well-run event. It was packed. And so the perception when I left was like, things that Mercury does feel polished, positive, like, and like, whatever. And so it was a no-brainer to switch to Mercury. We knew nothing else about them, but like we had this one touch point and we'd built trust through it.
I really wanted to go to that event. Like their email was awesome, and they were giving out like free massages, and they had pictures of pillows.
Oh, different event. The one this was just like a normal panel.
This was a normal panel. Another Mercury event that I really wanted to go to was not the panel, but the one where they were giving out free massages.
I did not hear about this.
That sounds awesome.
Is it time to talk about challenges of the week?
I think we should.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, so here's the thing. So one of my core beliefs is that it is thoroughly enjoyable and meaningful to work with a group of people where you're all aiming up together. You're all trying to achieve more and more together, and individually, you're all helping each other aim up. Like, it's really meaningful for me when Erdifa gives me feedback, when Ivana gives me feedback, when Ian gives me feedback. Like, that is awesome. And it's really cool when we all do team retros and we all help each other like aim up and we say like, next time, let's do it even better. And here's how. Like that for me, like as just human, is so enjoyable and so meaningful. There's like a process running in my brain all the time, which is like, how do I help this person do this at a next level way? Like clearly they did this great. How do I help them do it, 1% better next time? Like ask the right question or whatever, like if I can. Another part of my brain sees how much is just going on in the company and sees just how everyone is working at like 97% capacity. There's like almost no more. And so I really struggle with where do I push and try to like help the person become the next level of them if I can? And where do I say like, I see that you're at full capacity. And I think that the price of getting it wrong is really high. Because when you're challenged and you have capacity for it, it feels great. And when you're challenged and you don't have capacity for it, it feels like drowning. And so I've been really struggling with that this week because of the number of things going on.
Yeah. I feel bad about asking for things. I know how hard people are working.
No, but I feel like this is like the team-wide challenge, right? Like even I feel bad just like asking. Today I had to ask Preston for some help on, doing top secret thing on a top secret dashboard.
Well, top secret once tomorrow.
Top secret.
At 7 a.m.
Right. And I felt so bad, like even because I know how much work he's already done, how much work he's still doing. And here I am like, hey, can you please huddle for 5 minutes? And there's no way around it because if not, I'm not going to be able to do it. But it just sucks. Like,
Danny, you pose this big question, but how do you actually approach or think about it, right? I guess that is the conflict. It's like how to know when to
learn the correct answer. Tune into our next episode.
If I'm being honest, I feel like I get it wrong all the time. Like when I when you close your laptop at the end of the day and you think through like your list of regrets of the day, it's when I just got that push and pull wrong. Like it feels bad. It feels great when the person is like, yeah, I got this. Like, let's do this. And it feels bad when the person's like looks at you in this like overwhelm and you're like, okay, I was wrong. Like, that was not the moment.
Wait, why do I feel like you're talking about me?
No, it's a general comment because behaviors. Yeah, I'm going to see myself out.
What about you, Ian? Not challenging enough?
I mean, no, definitely not. No, I mean, like, so one dynamic that I'm thinking about is the sort of recurring commitments that I've made with myself about what content looks like at Jam. balancing what is the sort of consistent day in, day out vision for what everything looks like versus picking what's the next thing. That's the dynamic that I'm finding difficult. And for example, with this podcast, when we do something like this podcast, what comes to mind is like, this could be the source of 1 million shorts and little videos that you could make about everything. This little insight about this little insight about this. And that could be a big fountain of content and awesome stuff that people might benefit from. But balancing this with like the next video that you want to be amazing, like me balancing what is the everyday commitment versus planning for this next thing is a challenge. And there's part of it that makes me think, all right, like you solve this problem by time blocking, by better time management. You know, if you just set up your day in a certain way, you can do all the things and you actually do have time for that new thing and the current thing. But there's part of me that thinks that if you're going to take a big swing, right, and you're actually going to do something that's like, wow, and you actually do something that's new, you need like, it needs to be a risk in a way, and you need to lean into it and you need to give it that time. So,
yeah.
I feel like, Ivana, how do you manage that? Because you have that too. There are like all these things that you do every single week just to keep things running. And then often there are like these new things where you're like, let's take a risk here and try this. How do you do it?
Apple Notes.
Problem solved. You heard it here, y'all.
I didn't
Apple
consider.
Just check things off when you're done. No, I mean, I think that once you do certain things a few times, they become easy to do and easier and faster than before. So what I try to do is not worry about those things and not spend a lot of mental energy on them anymore. Those things in my brain are kind of like, they are done. Even if I haven't really done them, I know that it's a matter of like, tuk, 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 10 minutes, whatever. So I don't let them take brain space, and I leave all my brain space for the new stuff. I think is what I do.
That's really powerful.
You leave all your brain space for the new stuff. Like I guess I'm not picking up what you're saying about it. Like you're
You don't have enough brain space. Yeah, that's the problem. you need to offload.
You have to open brain space. So like, here's an example. I used to, when we first started the events things, the event emails would take a lot of brain space. I would really think about, how am I going to write this perfect email? How am I going to get people excited? And I'm just talking about reminder emails, right? Like just to remind you that the event is tomorrow. And that would take a lot of like energy from me. That I don't think about that anymore, because we've have it down to like kind of a pretty neat formula. So, and I know the tone and I know the audience. So even though this week I wrote like 2 reminder emails for the event that's happening tomorrow, they didn't take any space from my mind.
The other thing that I've seen Ivana do, if this is like oversharing, just like yell, and also we can bleep it and cut it. But like, Ivana is like super Ivana before 1 p.m. Like everything she writes is like pristine. It's like so good copywriting. It's so good you like can't believe it, you know? And then everything written after 4 p.m. is like, it's like it needs a revision in the next morning. And so I really want to do like structuring of her day so that the new thing that takes brain space is in the time of day that can have brain space.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Smart.
Yes, absolutely. So like the emails for the event, I did those like at night, and the other stuff in the good time of my brain.
So 2 sponsors for this week is Apple Notes and 1 p.m. One of these days when we say let's rap, like maybe Ian can rap.
Wow, maybe Ian can rap.
I just had to say that.
Ian, can you just add a rap in post?